Thank y'all for coming back. Thank y'all for joining for the first time. This is the G Podcast. This is the G Podcast where we focus on family, friends, finances, freedom, and our future, and everything else. You heard? This is the G Podcast, and I greatly appreciate y'all tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the page, hit that like button, and I definitely encourage you to leave your thoughts in the comments. I really appreciate the support. Been getting a lot of positive feedback thus far. Hey, we gonna keep working, putting in the work. I got goals, and I hope that along this journey, those goals help bring us closer together. That is the hope, right? That would be money, all right? Today, want to continue this discussion around that trinity that we've been talking about, that framework: personal, professional, creative. Because those are really the pillars that helped me get to this point today with the podcast. And it's a lot of P's. I guess the kids say they pushing P these days. I don't know. Let me take a little bit sip of this water real quick. So far, I've given a little brief introduction, if not, far detail on each one, but I've had one episode just introducing the idea of why that framework was important for me to get here from a personal, professional, and creative standpoint. And then I tried to take the time to address each of those individually, starting with the personal, then the professional. Today, we got to lock in on the creative side. And you might say, well, what is the whole point? I think the whole point for this is really to make sure we emphasize the importance of creation. And you have to make time to create. You have to make time to create. We spend so much time going through the motions, waking up, taking care of our loved ones, going to work, coming home, taking care of our loved ones, going to sleep, repeat, do it over and over and over again. It's hard enough for people to just carve out time for themselves to have peace of mind. That's hard enough. But how are you able to put yourself in a position to where not only you can have time and to have peace of mind, not just peace of mind, but to challenge yourself in an enriching way where you're creating something? I said at the very beginning, well, I actually don't know if it was the very beginning, but I'll say it again. I am an artist at heart. How would I define an artist? To me, art is all about expression. And I think that I am a master of expression. I am an artist at heart. I've always had a knack to express how I feel, regardless of who I was speaking to. Art doesn't have to be about how you speak. It could be about how you move, what you see, what you draw, so many different elements. What you taste, the senses. Art is sensual. It's it's godly. It taps into something that you literally can't explain. We're all drawn to certain genres of music, certain types of TV shows or films, paintings, styles of pictures, Broadway shows. Art is so powerful. I mean, what would the black church be without all that art baked into the service? The music, the dance, the singing, just so much expression. Art is so powerful. My creative journey has always, well, let me not say always. I didn't even pause. It's tough to speak and use words like always and never because what's always and never? Not much. Can't really think of anything that's always or never. It's not much out there. So I apologize if you take me too literal. Just wanted to say that. For a very long time, I have pursued this idea of hip hop. I remember writing my first raps in elementary school and, you know, may rest in peace, Coolio. I remember performing Gangsta's Paradise at a talent show. That expressive art form of hip hop, I was always drawn to. My brother introduced me to how to make beats. I can't make beats. Talk about that in more detail, but that creative art form of hip hop just, it had me from day one. It hooked me. It hooked me. My influences, I wanted to look like them, talk like them, of course, dress like them. Hip hop, very influential on who I am today as a person. Just want to shout out who gave me this right here. Shout out to you. Shout out to you, Lou. My guy. Hip hop is so influential, man. I dove in immediately. The culture, trying to talk like my favorite artists, dress like them, their brands. You grow up wanting to do things like them. You see this behind me. I mean, I don't know. It says black is beautiful. Let's be clear. I did go to Dublin. I did go to that Guinness factory. But what made me want to go to Dublin? Bubbling in Dublin. Bubbling in Dublin. Furthermore, I've been to Gibraltar and I seen the big rock. I seen it. What really even sparked my interest in wanting to see a big rock in Gibraltar? How could you falter? Had to get off the boat so I could walk on water. Hey, y'all know what it is, man. Hip hop is so influential and impactful in so many ways that it just has an influence on how you carry yourself day to day. So I really chased that idea, but I never really chased it with everything until a bit later. I would do little writings here and there, young, go grow up, high school, still writing here and there. But I never actually tried to make a song and record myself until I got to college. I had made songs before then, but bringing it all together where you actually hear how you sound coming through a microphone, that's different. Some people don't like how they sound. Some people really like how they sound. Some people are completely unaware of how they sound. For me, that experience recording for the first time, hearing my voice was very enriching. It really helped open up my eye to something that I didn't see before. And the universe around me just helped affirm what I was seeing. Hey man, got pretty good voice, pretty good voice. And I hadn't even quite had control over it yet. Another reason why I feel art is so important is because it's the thing that opens up the gateway to your superpower through your ability to create. Everyone's not going to create the same thing. You may be a craftsman who can build stuff with your hands, and carpentry and masonry and all these other sort of just architectural or engineers, like so many different ways to create, but it's all art to me. It's expression. When you pursue what it is within you that's you can't even necessarily control the desire. It's a natural just desire to do it, and it makes you feel good. That's the beauty of art. It should make you feel good as an artist. And one of the most craziest advantages that you have is the ability to make yourself feel good because you can create. So I think being serious about that ability to create is very key to maximizing this time. Because when we start to neglect that itch to do that thing, it could be detrimental from an emotional standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint. And especially as we talk about the framework, it all works together. Personal and professional without any sense of creativity, you're like a robot at that point. That creativity, that's that thing that just makes you different. One of the biggest struggles I have had in the past, especially as an artist, is when the happiness starts to get removed. And then you start to create not because you have a natural desire to see something through to the end, or you have a vision that you're pursuing. You start to pursue attention or pursue, if it's not attention, it's not acknowledged, it's acknowledgement. You start to pursue, especially in this social media age, the likes, the comments, the follows. You pursue this need for praise, for acknowledgement. It's just, for me personally, where I went wrong with my approach to music that I won't make the same mistake with my approach to podcasting is that I was so self-conscious about the music I made for so many different reasons. Family, friends, and everything else around. At the time when I made music, I didn't have this level of clarity and control to express what I wanted to express without the fear of what others might think or say about me. And so I refrained from saying things that I may have wanted to say at some point because maybe I didn't want my mom to hear. Maybe I didn't want my significant other to hear. Maybe I don't know what someone will think of me if I say this thing. And then you start to make music based off what you think people want from you or what you think people want to hear. Like you try to become something that you're not almost. That was my mistake. And I tried to right that mistake as I still continued to make music. My last project, High Flyer to Most High, G the King, on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you listen to music. Intro music is off that album. Outro music for this podcast is off that album. And the whole reason I did that, it was all intentionally. That album was the first time where I was able to approach music in a way that was very goal-driven and intentional from the start. I had an idea of what I was trying to do from the start, and I pursued the idea with a certain level of relentlessness. What I learned from that experience was several things that helped me get to this point. Shout out to 2J. We worked on that project and set a goal that when we started meeting 2019, let's at least make sure we don't go more than 2 weeks back to back without linking. So that way we're always in the lab creating. You gotta, sometimes if you want something, if you want an outcome, your goal should not necessarily be the outcome. You sort of have to step back and think about realistically what are the things that drive you to that goal and focus on those drivers, the things that actually move the needle. That's how you get to the outcome. And so for me, I knew the thing to move the needle as it related to that music, working with my boy 2J, was the consistency part because he was the musician. And that was something I never really could do from a hip hop perspective. The one thing I did learn to do, though, was record at home. I did figure that part out. How and why did I figure that out? It was out of a need. It was out of necessity. It was important for me to figure out how to record at home because the cost of studio time, the access to microphones, and just working on the art of recording, it wasn't as widely available back then as it was today. But I did invest in what I had at the time to make sure that I could record myself whenever I wanted. And that forced me to learn these digital, I don't know what the acronym is, but the Pro Tools, GarageBand, Logic, all these different recording softwares that you can use, Audition. It forced me to learn how to utilize that stuff. I didn't know how that would help me today. I just knew that was what I needed to do to hold myself, or not even to hold myself, to put myself in position to create consistently, which was very tough as a hip hop artist because I had to depend on so many people for so many things. Even though I could record, I still had trouble with the settings at the time. It's one thing to be able to record, it's one thing to be able to record quality. And then when you pair that with music, that's a whole other story. And the ability to mix. Like, I'm not an audio engineer. I would never disrespect that community by calling myself an audio engineer, because those folks, I've seen some wizards that can take a very piece of audio and make it sound grand. You should listen to High and Mighty. I recorded that whole thing on a very crappy microphone in a closet in Amsterdam. No, nothing. That was my first like full-length original album that I put together. And the audio engineer, he definitely had a skill set, or has a skill set, to get the best out of whatever that microphone is producing. So shout out to the audio engineers, and shout out to y'all who have noticed the smooth audio coming through on the other end of them headphones. When y'all hit play, motherfucker said, wow, that boy sound clean. These are the facts. So, working on that idea of making music, pursuing the love of hip hop, introduced me to audio engineering. Even though I'm not an expert, I do understand that it takes a little bit of nuance to get the frequencies just right. So, as we continue from working with the software, learning these things, I then had to really figure out my voice, which is something that I think most vocal artists struggle with early on, because they often might sound like somebody else, maybe their favorite artist, they're imitating stuff they might hear. For me, I really honed in on my voice. How does it sound on that microphone? And I really started to be critical of it. How does it sound? How am I using it? What sounds best for me? And so creating music frequently forced me to listen to myself, and it forced me to start to dabble with that software to understand what I have to do to make it sound as best possible. No clue how that would get me to this point at the time, but I think you can already see where this is going. In addition to being a vocal artist, I also pursued visual arts in the form of photography. Bought a camera, started looking at all the videos, learning about ISO, aperture, white balance, all these things, the tint, the hue, and then I had to learn how to use another software program like Lightroom or Photoshop in Adobe. I had no clue that a lot of audio visual professionals use Adobe Premiere to edit video content, but I got introduced to Adobe through Lightroom. And though video and pictures are different, they are very much the same in that it's just a moving image. So it's about understanding what's going to give that image the look you want to express. Now, I'm still working to get it right, but I know my experience taking photos, working in Lightroom to give them the right look that I wanted to have the right feel within that image, you got to know what levers to pull. You got to know when to move the shadows, the highlights, the exposure, the contrast, how to work the curve, pause. So when I'm doing all of this stuff professionally, or excuse me, creatively, it's all for the love. And boy, oh boy, is that an expensive hobby. But this is where, this is why, again, money is not the goal. Unfortunately, too many of us allow money to be an excuse to not do something. When in reality, I'm not saying we should be financially irresponsible. I want to be very, very, very clear.
No.
I'm not saying that at all. But I did say on a prior pod that this idea of generational wealth is a myth. It's a myth. We will talk about that eventually, but it's a myth. If you allow yourself to miss out on experiences that you could have taken advantage of, but you made a decision to say that money would be the reason why not, I think that's something to think about. The goal should not be to accumulate money, but to use the money to enrich your experiences. Every artist, I don't care what it is, can relate to this. I can guarantee you. Because the amount of money that you have to spend as an artist is crazy. I don't care if you're a music artist, a painter, photographer, graphic artist, florist. It don't matter. So many different culinary artists. It's expensive. You got supplies, equipment, the time. Art is not cheap. So I understand that is a deterrent, but you have to find ways to create. You can't allow those perceived barriers to be the excuse why you don't pursue the passion. You just have to find a way to keep at it. Even if it is just a little bit, you have to find a way to keep at it. And so for me, creatively, that music, the High Flyer, the Most High, that project, that was like very fulfilling for me. That was where I didn't make the music to prove to anyone other than to myself. I looked at what I had yet to accomplish as an artist at that time, and I said to myself, you know what? If you do this here, you won't have nothing else to prove to anyone because you did what you said you were going to do. So that's what High Flyer, the Most High was for me. But the thing about creating that album was that it opened up the door for this as a reality. That was where it was. I've always thought, like there again with the term always, I would say since about 2017, actually, well before that. It was 2015, 2014, actually, 2014, Laredo. That was when I first started listening to Combat Jack when I was at work. I was listening to the Combat Jack podcast. And then from there, started listening to other podcasts But Combat Jack was the introduction. And then from there, as I started listening to other podcasts, Brilliant Idiots, Serial, of course, you got to give Joe Budden his credit. Definitely been listening there. But I also started listening to podcasts for things that I didn't anticipate, like professional development, just random subjects. So much information out there. I started to think like, I think I could do that if I had my own podcast. But it wasn't until I was creating High Flyer the Most High where those conversations with my boy 2J really were unique, and we both said like we should be doing a podcast. That was 2019. And so it took this amount of time. This is 2022. It took 3 or so years to really get to this point of actually saying like, yeah, I should be doing that. But after I completed the album and I released it September 2020, that was COVID. This is where the universe just shifted everything, right? When COVID hit 2020, I had been working on that project all of 2019, had all these grand ideas of what I was going to do with that music in 2020. I was stubbornly set on a release date in September, regardless of COVID. I wasn't moving it. So many lessons learned as a creative from that standpoint. But I was so fulfilled with that project. I said, you know what? Now the next project is not going to be related to music. I can go on and do something different. And that's where the idea of the podcast came to be. Me and 2J, we went after this idea together, did some pilot episodes, shot a few different times, practicing like what that's like to do the conversation, to record it, what the goal is of it. And it takes a long time. I think the biggest challenge with this sort of art and doing it to the best of your ability is the element of consistency. So that's why my goal is locked in on consistency as a creative with this journey. You got to lock in so I can do this every week, 2023. Y'all hold me accountable. If a week go by, y'all got to let me know and hold me accountable. When we were wrapping up the album, COVID was in full effect. It slowed a lot of stuff down. And from a professional standpoint, it forced me to work remote as well. And so this sort of perfect storm of events that COVID brought all together from a personal, professional, and creative standpoint. Personally, I had already how can I say this? From a personal standpoint, I already had what most men wish to have. Personally, I go to sleep next to a very beautiful woman. I wake up next to a very beautiful woman, and then I repeat and do the same thing every single day. Life is simple. And I already had that. Not only did I have the opportunity to every day wake up and go to sleep next to a beautiful woman, I actually enjoy spending time with that person. So personally, I had everything I felt I need to feel like I'll do whatever else professionally and creatively to keep me going personally, because that is so enriching and fulfilling. And those personal relationships, whether that be not just with my wife, but just family, friends, those relationships and how they have impacted me. I've really had to wrestle with these things so that they don't hurt my personal relationships moving forward, which is a big key as to why I feel I'm ready to do this type of podcast. It's really taught me to break down that wall of judgment and just try to see things for what it is and accept people for who they are. From a professional standpoint, wanting to help people was always at the core of what I want to do with my time. And when you look at the professional world, you spend so much time there, arguably more than you do around your own loved ones. When you have to show up for any job and you're putting in the work, that's a huge investment of your time and energy. So, how are you choosing to invest that time and energy? I think that's important to think about. For me, I've always wanted to help people. Might sound cliche, but it's the honest truth. I'm never motivated to make the most money, but I have always been motivated in a way where I feel good about myself because of what I've done. That's the thing that motivates me. Do I feel good about what I've done? Money won't always make me feel good about what I've done. So professionally, because I was stubborn enough to really honor that about me, it's helped me get to a point to where COVID forced me to start working remote. And again, I work in a learning and development context in corporate America, which means I facilitate workshops and trainings, and I help people in corporate America. In a sales context, more specifically, sales development, outbound prospecting. When COVID started, I had never done virtual trainings, talking into a lens, talking to people who just stay on mute, keep their cameras off, don't engage with you when you're actually sitting there. Little did I know that once COVID started, I would be practicing just talking into a lens without a lot of feedback. And I had a new responsibility to make sure that I was able to deliver at a certain level, regardless of what anyone would say back to me. I also had to make sure that I was flexible enough to adapt to different learning styles, different backgrounds, and ultimately not make it about me, but about them so I can figure out how I can best help them. But it's hard to do that without taking the time to get to understand who they are and how can I say? It's one thing if you want to help somebody, don't just tell them your advice per se. You got to understand who they are and what motivates them. Then we can start to help. And so for me, that combination, personally, professionally, It's all starting to just mesh now, and COVID's making it work together and intertwine. I'm now working from home, talking into a lens, having to be in a camera every day professionally for work. Y'all know what that's like. People workspace be all cruddy. They weren't ready for that. Everybody workspace was cruddy when COVID first happened. Everybody had terrible workspace, but I kept looking in that lens and saying, let me do this. Let me do that. Let me do this. And that visual aesthetic within that video frame, how to frame the video. You start low key working on how to frame your video, even if it is just your webcam. So personally and professionally, I was already creating a skill set that put me in position to do this sort of podcast. But creatively, the icing on the cake is the superpower on top of all of that. Not only do I just have a natural gift as it relates to the skills in podcasting, the intangible, what you hear coming through. That's my superpower.
Wow.
And I can say that confidently. I'm a smooth talking motherfucker, man. Smooth talking motherfucker, man.
It doesn't matter how you feel.
This is what I know to be true. That's how I got to this point. It wasn't a straight line. I didn't necessarily expect that it would happen. It didn't happen when I wanted it to happen. I've tried to launch other podcasts, but the timing wasn't right. I wasn't ready. Still had to figure out how I was going to be consistent. Excuse me. But once I had the right idea, it hit me like a ton of bricks because being consistent was the thing I was missing. So once I had that idea, to not hit the microphone. Once I had that idea, this is the G podcast where I'm going to focus on family, friends, finances, freedom, and our future. I said, I can work with that. Then at that point, once I had the idea, I had to ask myself, what do I need to do so that, unlike with your other creative endeavors, how can you avoid those same pitfalls? And in the past, from a music perspective, those pitfalls largely was because I didn't have the ability to do what I needed to do without the help of other people. I had to have an audio engineer. I had to have some sort of musician, producer, beat maker to give me the soundtrack. I had to have that. I also had to have some other things that I could never get, but I know as a creative, when you have to rely on other people, it stifles the creation. So before I went in with going after this idea of creating a podcast, I really had to ask myself, how much of that can you just do on your own? I started studying, doing my research. Of course, I look at all these different podcasts currently, from the Joe Buttons, the $1 Million, the Pivots, the I Am Athletes. And I listened to another one, Pivot. Now, I ain't going to get into that. But that Pivot pod ain't the first Pivot pod. Shout out to Scott Galloway, Kara Swisher. That's one of my favorite podcasts. It's called Pivot. I listen to podcasts that help me with professional development in my industry, also in my field of learning and development. So I just consume so much information via podcasts. I don't even remember why I was naming all those different podcasts, but oh yeah. I know what good podcasts sound like, and that's what I'm competing with. I didn't want to come out the gate sounding like it doesn't need to sound. From a visual standpoint, I knew I would need at least some sort of camera, and I try my best to come out the gate with something that puts me in a unique light so you can see that I'm really putting a lot of thought and time into this. It's very intentional. And I've invested in like all other art forms, this is another expensive art form. Man. But the one thing I think I am most happy to say moving forward, and why I'm so confident looking forward in 2023, I think I can hit that goal every week. Why? Because I can do everything. And so far, what you've seen is just the beginning, and I've been doing everything. I've recorded from this angle. I've recorded from that angle. I'm recording into this microphone. I'm tracking it all out. I'm going to go over it and try and mix it and make sure it sounds the way it needs to sound afterward. I'm going to take all of that audio from here. I'm going to take all of the visuals from there. And then I'm going to sync it all together. And I'm going to have that multi-camera switching up. Pew, pew, pew. I'm going to add those captions that you see down here. The captions. I put them right there. Had to learn how to use the software. And I'm going to export that video and I'm going to upload it to YouTube. And all I have to do is hold myself accountable to being here and doing what I know I'm already really good at. And so this is the G podcast. And this is how I got here. I can't wait to explore this journey even further. And I'm really genuinely excited about what's to come. Shout out to all of you who've already sent me messages, text messages, DMs. I really, really appreciate that. However, please subscribe to my YouTube page in the short term. That's the only place I'm putting full episodes. Not going to put this on the distribution platforms to put everywhere. I'm very intentional on building community, and I want to start here, an accessible place like YouTube, and we can meet here to talk about how we as individuals can have a stronger impact on our families, our friends, our finances, our freedom, and our future. And I hope that if I can demonstrate the importance of being vulnerable and honest. If we're going to close out right here. If you are ashamed to speak on your actions, it's not my problem. Probably shouldn't have did it. If you do something shameful and then you get mad at other people for talking about what you actually did, that's on you. It's on you.
It doesn't matter how you feel.
You shouldn't have did it. You have to accept when you make mistakes. No one's perfect. But don't be walking around mad at other people because they spoke on something that you did to them. If you're a person and you're doing things to people and then they go tell someone how you were, stop being again.
It doesn't matter how you feel.
That's what I wanted to say. Don't be afraid to tell your story in a way that is truthful, not hurtful. And I hope that you all feel comfortable enough to join me, not just as a listener, but if you have interest of being a guest and having a conversation, those podcasts are going to be a lot different than these. That's what I can tell you. That's what I can tell you. Just being here by myself, talking into these lenses is one thing, into this microphone is something else. But the real, I think, difference will come when we start bringing on different guests and having that dialogue. I think that's going to be key to this. And I can't wait to explore that further. So this is how we got here. This is the G podcast. Before we end, man, one last shout out to this purple drink. Delicious. Conniption Kinship. Good enough to share with your kinfolk. These little purple martinis, man. I think I've been on these for a few episodes now. That's the Conniption Kinship. But, too, hey, look, that Old Hillside is still doing what it do. Shout out to Old Hillside. Straight rye whiskey, straight cash. Old Hillside. Straight rye whiskey, straight cash. Hey, man. You got a business, products, services. Let's talk. I'd love to just let people know what you're doing. This is the G podcast where we focus on family, friends, finances, freedom, and our future, and everything else. You heard? This is the G podcast. I greatly appreciate y'all tuning in. Can't necessarily tell you what's coming next, but I would highly encourage you to go look at those previous episodes to get more context on this framework. This is how we got here, the G podcast. It's all about my personal background, my professional background, my creative background, and how that all intertwined to lead to this moment here today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is the G podcast. Outro music, High Flyer the Most High. If you do have interest in checking out my creative background, the music is available. If you search G the King, GTHA King, High Flyer the Most High. high and mighty. This is the G podcast. This outro is from the last track on that project called Exhale. The whole reason why I use that as the theme music. The last track on the project is called Exhale. You should listen because that's what brings the project together. Spark, Puff, Exhale. And the album is framed around that idea. Spark, Puff, Exhale. Exhale was the last track on that project. And I only thought it was appropriate that that was the exhale from that phase of my creative life to give a new breath of life here. And that's where we are picking up where I last left off musically with that track, Exhale. It was a fresh breath to get to this point. This is the G podcast, and I hope y'all enjoy listening. Make sure you tune in next time. Shout out to y'all for listening. This is the G podcast.
But it sounds like it made it. It doesn't matter how you feel. Welcome home, flyer.
Ha! All right. Check there. Main cam going off.